Maya's voice cut through the marble halls of Belmont Industries like a blade. "You left your family for this?" she demanded, her eyes locked on the man who had once promised her forever. Daniel's face drained of all color as he stammered, I don't know this woman. She's clearly unstable." The words tumbled from his lips like poison, each one a fresh betrayal. Celeste, draped in designer perfection, looked at Maya with disgust. "Security? Get her out of here," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the polished walls. But it was little Liam's voice that shattered the tension. Tugging at his mother's hand, he looked up with innocent confusion and asked, "Why did Daddy lie, Mommy?" The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of betrayal hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Welcome back to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where love, betrayal, and redemption collide in ways you never saw coming. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because today's story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty, love, and the price of ambition. To my incredible subscribers, thank you for making this channel a place where real stories matter. Your comments and support fuel every narrative we share. Maya and Daniel Thomas had built their love on a foundation of dreams and determination. In their cramped one-bedroom apartment, where the walls seemed to breathe with their hopes, they had learned that happiness didn't require a bank account. Just calloused hands, warm hearts, and the kind of love that makes instant noodles taste like a feast. Maya would often catch Daniel staring at her while she folded their few belongings, his eyes soft with adoration. "What?" she'd ask, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," he'd whisper, pulling her close until she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. Their son Liam was the light that made their small world complete. At 3 years old, he had his father's mischievous smile and his mother's gentle spirit. The boy would run to Daniel every evening when he returned from work, tiny arms stretched wide, shouting, "Daddy's home." Those were the moments when poverty felt like a distant concept. When love filled every corner of their modest life. The night Maya told Daniel about their second pregnancy, the joy in his eyes was unmistakable. She had waited until Liam was asleep, then sat beside him on their worn couch, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the pregnancy test in his palm. "Are you serious?" Daniel breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Maya nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We're going to have another baby." Daniel swept her into his arms, spinning her around their tiny living room until she laughed through her tears. "I love you so much, Maya. Our family is growing and I promise, I'm going to give you both everything you deserve." That promise felt solid then. Unbreakable. Like the foundation of everything they were building together. Life seemed to align with their dreams when Daniel received the promotion. Floor supervisor at one of the manufacturing plants owned by the mysterious Richard Belmont, a name whispered with equal parts fear and respect throughout the city. Belmont was a ghost in a suit, a billionaire who controlled industries but never showed his face. His factories were the heartbeat of their community, feeding hundreds of families, yet no one could claim to have truly met the man himself. "This is it, Maya," Daniel said the night he got the news, his eyes bright with possibility. "This is our chance to finally give Liam and the baby the life they deserve. A real house. A backyard. Maybe even that swing set Liam keeps talking about." Maya pressed her hand to her growing belly and smiled. "As long as we're together, we already have everything. But success has a way of attracting attention you never asked for." The day Celeste Belmont walked into that factory changed everything, though neither Maya nor Daniel knew it yet. She moved through the industrial space like a queen touring peasant lands, her designer heels clicking against concrete floors, her silk dress a stark contrast to the honest sweat and steel around her. Celeste Belmont was everything Maya had never aspired to be, polished to perfection, draped in wealth, carrying herself with the kind of entitlement that comes from never having to count coins or wonder where your next meal would come from. She was beautiful in the way that money makes possible, sculpted, refined, untouchable. When her eyes landed on Daniel directing a group of workers, his sleeves rolled up and shirt marked with the honest stains of hard work, something shifted in her expression. There was hunger there. Not love. Celeste had never learned the difference. She didn't ask his name. She didn't inquire about his character or his dreams. She simply decided she wanted him, the way she might choose a piece of jewelry from a display case. Comment below and tell me, what's the most dangerous kind of person to fall in love with? Someone who sees you as a trophy, or someone who never really sees you at all? Let me know your thoughts because this story is about to show you exactly why that matters. Over the following weeks, Celeste began orchestrating chance encounters. She would appear at the factory during Daniel's shifts, asking technical questions she didn't care about, complimenting his leadership skills, making him feel important in ways he had never experienced before. "You're wasted here," she told him one afternoon, her fingers brushing against his arm as she spoke. "A man with your potential should be running companies, not just supervising floors." Daniel felt something he had never felt with Maya, the intoxicating pull of being wanted by someone who seemed impossibly out of his league. Maya's love had always been steady, sure, built on shared struggles and genuine affection. But Celeste's attention felt like standing in spotlight he had never known existed. When Celeste finally revealed who she was, Richard Belmont's daughter and sole heir to an empire worth billions, Daniel's world tilted on its axis. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was opportunity wrapped in silk and perfume, offering him a life he had only seen in movies. "I could change your life," Celeste said simply, her eyes holding promises of wealth beyond imagination. "The question is, are you brave enough to let me?" That night, Daniel returned to their small apartment where Maya was reading Liam a bedtime story, her hand resting on her rounded belly. She looked up at him with those trusting eyes, the same eyes that had seen potential in him when he was nobody, that had loved him when love was all they had to offer each other. "How was work, honey?" she asked, shifting to make room for him on their small bed beside their sleeping son. Daniel looked at his wife, really looked at her. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, wearing one of his old t-shirts because it was comfortable. She was beautiful in the way that mattered, beautiful in the way that lasted. Beautiful in the way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with soul. But as he kissed her forehead and whispered, "Fine, just fine," Daniel was already making calculations in his mind. Already weighing love against ambition. Already choosing between the woman who had built him up and the woman who promised to elevate him. The tragedy wasn't that he was tempted. The tragedy was that he was already falling. The moment Daniel made his choice, he didn't announce it with grand gestures or tearful confessions. Instead, he did what cowards do. He simply began erasing his family from existence, one lie at a time. When Celeste asked about his personal life during one of their increasingly frequent private conversations, Daniel felt the words form in his throat like poison he was choosing to swallow. "I'm single," he said, the lie rolling off his tongue with surprising ease. "No attachments. No complications." Celeste smiled, the kind of smile that showed perfect teeth and revealed nothing of the soul behind them. "Good. I don't like complications either." What followed was a courtship that felt more like a business transaction wrapped in expensive dinners and designer gifts. Celeste didn't love Daniel, she collected him. She paraded him through exclusive restaurants where the wine cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget, introduced him to circles where his manufacturing background was seen as charmingly rugged, and slowly began reshaping him into the man she wanted to own. "You need better clothes," she told him one evening, running her manicured fingers along his collar. "A man of your position should look the part." Daniel found himself nodding, already forgetting how Maya used to trace that same collar with work-roughened hands, telling him he was handsome just as he was. Meanwhile, at home, Maya was beginning to notice the changes. Daniel's kisses became perfunctory, his conversations distracted, his presence somehow absent even when he was sitting right beside her. "Everything okay at work?" she asked one night, settling beside him on their couch with a cup of tea cradled in her hands. "Just busy," Daniel replied, not looking up from his phone, a new phone Celeste had insisted he needed for professional purposes. Maya placed her hand on his arm, the way she always did when she sensed he needed comfort. "We can talk about it, you know. Whatever's bothering you." For a moment, Daniel's resolve wavered. This was Maya, his Maya, offering him the kind of unconditional support that had carried them through their darkest days. But then his phone buzzed with a text from Celeste about dinner reservations at a restaurant that cost more than his monthly rent, and the moment passed. "I'm fine," he said, pulling away from her touch. "Really?" The wedding happened with the kind of speed that only unlimited money can buy. 2 months from Daniel's first lie to standing at an altar that cost more than most people's houses, exchanging vows with a woman who saw him as the perfect accessory to her inherited empire. Celeste wore a dress that graced magazine covers. Daniel wore a suit that transformed him into someone Maya wouldn't have recognized. And somewhere across town, Maya was sitting in their tiny apartment, staring at her phone, waiting for her husband to come home. She had tried calling him that morning like she did every morning, wanting to share the news that the baby had kicked for the first time. But his phone went straight to voicemail. Again. "Daniel, it's me," she said to the recording, her voice bright with excitement despite her growing worry. "The baby kicked. Right here, right against my ribs." Liam felt it too and he got so excited he started jumping around saying he's going to teach the baby to play soccer. "Call me back when you can." I love you. The message would never be returned. By evening, when Daniel still hadn't come home, Maya found herself pacing their small living room, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her phone. Liam was asleep in their bed, the only bed in their one-bedroom apartment, and the silence felt suffocating. She tried his work number. Disconnected. She tried calling the factory. Daniel Thomas? He doesn't work here anymore, ma'am. Left about a month ago. Maya's legs gave out. She sank onto their threadbare couch, the same couch where Daniel had spun her around in joy when she told him about the pregnancy, and felt her world begin to crumble. Days turned into weeks. Bills arrived with increasing urgency. The rent notice appeared on their door like a death sentence. Maya took whatever work she could find, cleaning offices at night, waiting tables during lunch shifts, anything to keep food on the table and a roof over Liam's head. "Where's Daddy?" Liam asked one morning, his 3-year-old eyes wide with confusion. Maya knelt down to his level, smoothing his hair with trembling fingers. "Daddy had to go away for work, sweetheart. But Mommy's here. Mommy's always going to be here." It was the first lie she had ever told her son, but it wouldn't be the last. The stress was eating her alive. She felt it in her bones, in the constant ache in her back, in the way her hands shook when she counted the few dollars she had left for groceries. The baby seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly inside her, as if trying to comfort her from within. But Maya was strong. She had always been strong. She would find a way to survive this, to protect her children, to build something from the ashes of the life Daniel had burned down. She just didn't know yet how much more she would have to lose before she could begin to rebuild. The rain that night seemed to fall with the weight of Maya's desperation. She had been working 14-hour days, cleaning offices until midnight, then rushing to the diner for the early morning shift that started at 5. Her body was screaming for rest, but rest was a luxury she couldn't afford when the eviction notice on her door gave her less than a week to find money she didn't have. Maya pressed one hand against her swollen belly as she walked home from her cleaning job, feeling the baby's restless movements. Even her unborn child seemed to sense the chaos surrounding them, kicking and turning as if trying to find peace in a world that had become anything but peaceful. "I know, little one," she whispered into the rain. "Mommy's trying. I'm trying so hard." The cramping started just 2 blocks from her apartment. At first she thought it was just exhaustion, her body's way of demanding the rest she couldn't give it. But as the pain intensified, sharp and unforgiving, Maya knew with horrible certainty that something was terribly wrong. She stumbled, catching herself against a lamppost, her breath coming in short gasps. The rain soaked through her thin jacket, mixing with the tears she hadn't realized were falling. People passed by, umbrellas creating small shelters of indifference, no one stopping to help the pregnant woman who was clearly in distress. The pain came in waves now, each one stronger than the last. Maya tried to reach for her phone, but her hands were shaking too violently to dial. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet, and she felt herself falling, until the cold, wet pavement rose up to meet her. When she woke up in the hospital hours later, the silence told her everything she needed to know before the doctor ever spoke the words. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Thomas. We did everything we could." Maya didn't cry. Not then. She simply stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in each square, focusing on anything that wasn't the emptiness she now felt where life had been growing just hours before. The nurse was kind, her voice gentle as she explained what had happened. "The stress, the overwork, the malnutrition, your body was pushed beyond its limits. Sometimes, even when we want something so desperately, our bodies make the choice for us." Maya nodded mechanically, signing papers she didn't read, accepting condolences she couldn't process. When they finally let her go home, she walked back through the same streets where she had fallen, past the same lamppost where she had felt her world collapse, and somehow made it back to the apartment where Liam was waiting with the elderly neighbor who watched him when Maya worked late. "Mommy?" Liam ran to her, his 3-year-old arms wrapping around her legs. "Where were you?" "Mrs. Patterson said you were at the doctor." Maya knelt down, pulling her son close, breathing in the innocent sweetness of his hair. For a moment she allowed herself to feel the weight of what she had lost, but then she pushed it down, buried it deep where it couldn't break her completely. "Mommy had to go to the doctor, baby. But I'm home now." It wasn't until 3 days later when Liam patted her belly during their bedtime routine and asked, "When is the baby going to come out and play with me, Mommy?" that Maya finally broke. She cried for the child she would never hold, for the husband who had abandoned them, for the dreams that had died on a rain-soaked street. But mostly, she cried for the innocence in her son's eyes that she was about to shatter. The baby had to go to heaven, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam's little face scrunched up in confusion. But I wanted to teach the baby to kick a ball. I know, baby. I know. Life has a way of testing us in the moments when we feel most broken. Have you ever had to find strength you didn't know you had just to survive another day? Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever felt like Maya in this moment, because what happens next shows us that sometimes our darkest moments prepare us for our greatest victories. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of survival. Maya took every job she could find, her grief a constant companion that she carried like a stone in her chest. She cleaned buildings where executives made decisions that affected thousands of lives, never knowing that one of those executives would soon change hers. It was during one of these late-night cleaning shifts that Maya heard the commotion outside the office building. The sound of struggle, of someone calling for help, cut through the quiet hum of vacuum cleaners and the distant traffic. Maya's first instinct was to ignore it. She had learned the hard way that getting involved in other people's problems usually led to more trouble than she could handle. But then she heard it again, clearer this time. An older man's voice, shaky with fear, crying out for someone to help him. Without thinking, Maya dropped the mop she was holding and ran toward the sound. What she saw when she burst through the building's front doors was an elderly man in an expensive suit being cornered by two younger men who were attempting to wrestle a briefcase from his grasp. "Please," the older man was saying, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'll give you money, just don't hurt me." Maya didn't consider the danger. She didn't think about the fact that she was a small woman facing two grown men who were clearly willing to commit violence. She only saw someone who needed help, and despite everything that had happened to her, despite all the ways the world had failed her, Maya Thomas still believed in doing the right thing. She grabbed the heavy mop bucket she had been using and heaved it with all her strength at the attackers. "Get away from him," she screamed, her voice carrying all the rage and pain she had been holding inside for months. The bucket connected with a solid thud, and the two men, surprised by the sudden intervention, released their hold on the briefcase and fled into the night. Maya rushed to the older man's side, kneeling beside where he had fallen. His face was bloodied, his hands shaking, but his eyes held a clarity that spoke of intelligence and strength, even in his vulnerability. "Thank you," he whispered, accepting the clean handkerchief Maya pulled from her pocket. "You didn't even know me." Maya helped him sit up against the building's wall, her cleaning uniform still damp from the mop water, her hair falling out of its ponytail from the struggle. "Didn't have to," she said simply, checking to make sure he wasn't seriously injured. "Are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance?" The man studied her face in the dim streetlight, something like wonder crossing his features. "You risked your safety for a complete stranger. Why?" Maya shrugged, the question seeming almost absurd to her. "Because it was the right thing to do." 2 weeks passed after the incident with the stranger, and Maya had almost forgotten about the encounter entirely. Her days remained a relentless cycle of work and worry, each morning bringing new challenges she had to face alone. The diner where she waited tables during lunch shifts had become her second home, filled with the familiar sounds of sizzling bacon and clinking coffee cups. It was during one of these ordinary lunch shifts that Maya's world tilted on its axis once again. She was refilling coffee for a regular customer when the television mounted above the bar caught her attention. The local news was broadcasting a story that made her hands freeze around the coffee pot. Billionaire industrialist Richard Belmont died peacefully in his sleep last night at the age of 68, the news anchor announced, her voice carrying the weight of significant loss. Mr. Belmont, who built an empire from a single manufacturing plant, was known for his reclusive nature and his enormous contributions to the local economy. Maya stared at the screen, recognition dawning slowly. The photograph they showed, a formal portrait of a distinguished older man in an expensive suit, looked familiar, though she couldn't quite place where she had seen him before. "Tragic loss," her customer commented, following her gaze to the television. "Man employed half this city one way or another." Maya nodded absently, still studying the photograph. Something about those eyes, that face. But it was what came next that stopped her heart entirely. The camera cut to footage from outside Belmont Industries, where mourners had gathered to pay their respects. And there, standing beside the ornate casket as it was loaded into a hearse, was a face Maya knew better than her own reflection. Daniel. Her Daniel, though he looked nothing like the man who had once shared instant noodles with her in their tiny apartment. This version of her husband wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His hair was styled with expensive precision, his posture carrying a confidence that money could buy. And beside him, her arm linked possessively through his, stood the most beautiful woman Maya had ever seen. Celeste Belmont, The caption identified her, Richard Belmont's daughter and heir. She was everything Maya wasn't: polished, elegant, draped in designer black that somehow made even grief look glamorous. The coffee pot slipped from Maya's numb fingers, crashing to the floor in a cascade of hot liquid and broken ceramic. The entire diner turned to look at her, but Maya couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. "Maya, honey, you okay?" her manager called out, rushing over with a mop. But Maya wasn't okay. She was watching her husband, her legally married husband, standing as the grieving son-in-law at a billionaire's funeral, playing the role of devoted family member in a life she knew nothing about. "I have to go," Maya whispered, untying her apron with shaking hands. "Maya, your shift isn't over for 3 hours." "I have to go," she repeated, louder this time, her voice cracking with the weight of realization. She ran from the diner, leaving behind confused customers and a manager calling her name. But Maya could only think of one thing: confronting the man who had destroyed her life for a chance at wealth and status. The bus ride to Belmont Industries felt both endless and too short. Maya's mind raced with questions, with anger, with a grief so profound it made her earlier losses pale in comparison. She had thought Daniel had simply abandoned them. She had never imagined he had built an entirely new life with another woman while she struggled to keep their son fed and housed. When the imposing glass tower of Belmont Industries came into view, Maya felt her resolve strengthen. She had lost her husband, her unborn child, her financial security, and her faith in the man she had loved more than life itself. But she still had her dignity, and she was going to make sure Daniel knew exactly what his choices had cost. The security guard at the front desk looked at her with barely concealed disdain, her second-hand clothes and work-worn appearance clearly marking her as someone who didn't belong in such an opulent environment. "I need to see Daniel Thomas," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm his wife." The guard's eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to." "Maya?" The voice came from behind her, smooth and cultured, carrying just a hint of curiosity. Maya turned to see Celeste Belmont approaching, her black funeral attire somehow making her look even more stunning than she had on television. "Do I know you?" Celeste asked, her head tilted slightly as she studied Maya's face. Before Maya could answer, Daniel appeared, stepping out of an elevator with the confidence of a man who belonged in boardrooms and executive suites. When his eyes met Maya's, every trace of color drained from his face. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 people standing in a marble lobby, surrounded by the evidence of wealth and success, while the weight of betrayal hung in the air like smoke. Maya looked at the man she had loved, the man she had built dreams with, the man who had promised her forever. And then she looked at the woman who had taken him from her, beautiful, wealthy, everything Maya could never be. "You left your family for this?" Maya asked, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. And in that moment, as Daniel stammered excuses and Celeste called for security, Maya realized that her journey toward justice was just beginning. Daniel's face went through a series of expressions in those few seconds: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, cold determination. Maya watched her husband transform before her eyes into someone she didn't recognize, someone capable of cruelty she had never imagined possible. "I don't know this woman," Daniel said, his voice carrying just the right amount of confusion mixed with concern. "She's clearly unstable." The words hit Maya like physical blows. Each syllable was a denial of their shared history, their love, their son sleeping peacefully at home with Mrs. Patterson. Daniel wasn't just abandoning her, he was erasing her, making her disappear as if she had never existed at all. "Unstable?" Maya's voice cracked with disbelief. "Daniel, it's me. It's Maya. We have a son together. Liam. Remember Liam? He asks about his daddy every single day." But Daniel's expression remained blank, almost bored, as if he were listening to the ravings of a stranger. "I've never seen this woman before in my life. Security, please escort her out before she causes a scene." Celeste stepped closer to Daniel, her arms sliding possessively around his waist. "Darling, should I call the police? She seems disturbed." Maya felt the world spinning around her. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be the man who had once traced her face with gentle fingers, who had whispered promises of forever against her skin, who had cried with joy when Liam took his first steps. "Daniel, please," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. Don't pretend you don't know us." But Daniel had already turned away, dismissing her with the casual indifference of someone brushing off an annoying interruption to their day. 2 security guards appeared as if from nowhere, their hands firm but not unkind as they took Maya's arms. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises," one of them said. If you continue to harass Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, we'll have to involve the police. Mrs. Thomas. The name hit Maya like a sledgehammer. Her name. Her married name. Now being used by another woman while she was treated like an intruder in her own husband's life. As the security guards guided her toward the exit, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the polished marble walls. She saw what they saw, a woman in second-hand clothes, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her hands marked by the honest work that had kept her and Liam alive. Next to Celeste's designer perfection, Maya looked exactly like what Daniel was claiming she was, nobody. The glass doors of Belmont Industries closed behind her with a soft whoosh, the sound of a world she would never belong to shutting her out permanently. Or so she thought. Little Liam was waiting for her when she returned to their apartment, his 3-year-old face bright with the uncomplicated joy that only children possess. He ran to her the moment she walked through the door, his small arms wrapping around her legs. Mommy? Mrs. Patterson let me help make cookies. Maya knelt down and pulled her son close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair, letting his innocent warmth chase away some of the chill that had settled in her bones. That sounds wonderful, baby, she managed, her voice mostly steady. But as they sat together that evening, sharing the cookies Liam had helped make, her son's questions began. Mommy, why did you go see Daddy today? Maya's hand stilled on the cookie she was breaking in half. What makes you think I saw Daddy? You smell sad, Liam said with the devastating honesty of childhood. You always smell sad after you try to call Daddy. Maya looked into her son's eyes, eyes that were exactly like Daniel's, eyes that held the same intelligence and sensitivity that had first made her fall in love with his father. How could she explain that the man who had given Liam life had just denied they ever existed? Liam, she said carefully, what would you say if I told you that Daddy might not be able to come home for a very long time? The little boy's face scrunched up in thought. Did Daddy do something bad? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that a 3-year-old couldn't possibly understand but somehow sensed anyway. Why did Daddy lie, Mommy? Liam asked, his voice small and confused. Maya felt her heart shatter all over again. Somehow, her innocent son had picked up on the deception, the betrayal, the fundamental wrongness of what Daniel had done to their family. I don't know, sweetheart, Maya whispered, pulling him closer. But Daddy's choices don't change how much Mommy loves you. 1 week later, Maya was sorting through the mail when she found it, an envelope so elegant it seemed out of place among the bills and advertisements. Heavy paper, embossed letterhead, her name written in flowing script that spoke of old money and older traditions. The return address made her hands tremble. The law offices of Hartwell, Blackstone and Associates. Estate Planning Division. Inside, the letter was brief but formal. Dear Mrs. Thomas, you are cordially invited to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Richard Belmont, scheduled for this Friday at 2 p.m. in our offices. Your presence is required as you are named as a beneficiary. Please bring proper identification and arrive promptly. Sincerely, Marcus Hartwell Esq. Maya read the letter 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding something fundamental. Richard Belmont, the name was familiar but she couldn't place it. A beneficiary? That was impossible. She had never known any wealthy people, had never done anything that would warrant being mentioned in a billionaire's will. But as she stared at the formal invitation, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Maybe, just maybe, her luck was finally about to change. The law offices of Hartwell, Blackstone and Associates occupied an entire floor of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. Maya felt every eye in the elevator judging her as she rode up to the 32nd floor, her simple black dress, the same one she had worn to her own mother's funeral 2 years ago, marking her as clearly out of place among the designer suits and expensive accessories of her fellow passengers. When the elevator doors opened, Maya stepped into a world of mahogany panels and leather-bound books, where even the air seemed to cost more than she made in a week. The receptionist, a woman whose jewelry probably cost more than Maya's annual rent, directed her to conference room A with a smile that was professional but distant. Maya paused outside the heavy wooden doors, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the brass handle. She had no idea why she was here, what possible connection she could have to Richard Belmont's estate, but something deep inside her whispered that whatever was about to happen would change her life forever. The conference room was exactly what she had expected: imposing, intimidating, designed to make people feel small. A massive table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than Maya's car. But it was the people already seated around that table that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. Daniel sat near the head of the table, looking every inch the successful businessman in his perfectly tailored suit. Beside him, Celeste held court like a queen, her black dress elegant enough for a magazine cover, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. Several men in expensive suits, executives from Belmont Industries, Maya assumed filled out the rest of the gathering. And then there was Maya, standing in the doorway in her second-hand dress, feeling like an imposter who had wandered into the wrong story. "Ah, Mrs. Thomas," said a distinguished older man who could only be Marcus Hartwell himself. "Please take a seat." Maya noticed that the only empty chair was directly across from Daniel and Celeste. As she made her way around the table, she could feel Celeste's eyes on her, assessing, dismissing. Daniel refused to meet her gaze at all, his attention focused on some papers in front of him as if they contained the secrets of the universe. "Now that we're all here," Mr. Hartwell began, "we can begin the reading of Richard Belmont's last will and testament. But first, Mr. Belmont left specific instructions that we begin with a video message he recorded shortly before his death." A large screen descended from the ceiling, and suddenly Richard Belmont filled the room. Maya gasped softly as she recognized him, not from the formal portrait she had seen on the news, but from that night outside the office building. The tired eyes, the grateful smile, the hands that had shaken as she helped him to his feet. The stranger she had saved was Richard Belmont. "If you're watching this," Richard's voice filled the room, warm despite his obvious frailty, "then I'm gone. But before I left this world, I met someone who reminded me what decency looks like in an age where it seems to have disappeared entirely." Maya felt every eye in the room turn to her, but she couldn't look away from the screen. "A woman who risked her own safety to help a stranger," Richard continued, his eyes seeming to look directly at Maya through the camera. "A woman who expected nothing and deserved everything. A woman who showed me that genuine goodness still exists in this world." Mr. Hartwell cleared his throat. "To Maya Thomas and her son Liam, I leave my entire estate. The business, the properties, the investments, the stocks. Everything." The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She stared at the screen, certain she had misheard, certain this was some kind of mistake. "Everything?" she whispered. But Richard wasn't finished. His image on the screen seemed to grow more intense, more purposeful. "As for Celeste," he said, his voice taking on a different tone, "you were raised as my daughter and I loved you as such. But the DNA test I had done last month confirmed what I had suspected for years. You are not my biological child. You are the daughter of the woman I once loved, but not of my blood." Celeste's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence like a knife. Maya watched in fascination and horror as the other woman's perfect composure began to crack. "And in all your 32 years, Richard continued, his voice heavy with disappointment, "you never once understood the value of what I built. You saw money as something to spend, power as something to wield over others, and love as something to purchase." Celeste stood up so suddenly her chair fell backward. "This is impossible," she said, her voice shrill with panic. "He can't do this. I'm his heir. I've always been his heir." Mr. Hartwell's voice was calm, professional. "The will is completely legal and binding, Ms. Belmont. DNA evidence supporting Mr. Belmont's claims is part of the estate documentation." Maya watched Daniel's face as the reality of the situation sank in. He had abandoned his family for a woman who had just lost everything. He had traded genuine love for fool's gold, and now he was left with nothing but the weight of his choices. "This is insane." Celeste screamed, her designer perfection finally cracking to reveal the entitled, desperate woman underneath. "She's nobody. Look at her. She's a cleaning woman, for God's sake." But Maya wasn't looking at Celeste anymore. She was staring at the screen where Richard Belmont's image continued to speak, his words washing over her like a benediction. "Maya Thomas showed me that character isn't about what you wear or where you come from. It's about what you do when no one is watching, when there's nothing in it for you, when helping someone else might cost you everything." Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she finally understood. Justice hadn't shouted. It hadn't announced itself with fanfare or drama. It had shown up in a will and quietly rewritten the ending. Maya sat in that mahogany-paneled room, surrounded by the wreckage of other people's expectations, and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: complete peace. Not joy, not excitement, not even relief, just peace. The kind that comes when the universe finally makes sense again. Around her, chaos erupted like a storm breaking against solid ground. Celeste was screaming now, her voice reaching octaves that no amount of finishing school could have prepared her for. "This is fraud. This is theft. I'll contest this will. I'll fight this until my dying day." Daniel had gone completely silent, his face the color of old paper as he stared at Maya with something that might have been recognition, not of who she was, but of what he had lost. The magnitude of his choice was written across his features like a map of regret. The executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, their practiced poker faces struggling to hide their shock. The woman they had probably dismissed as a nuisance, as someone who didn't belong in their world, now owned the company that employed them all. But Maya? Maya simply stood up. She didn't say a word to Daniel. Didn't acknowledge Celeste's hysterics. Didn't address the room full of powerful men who were now trying to recalculate their positions in a world where the cleaning woman had just become their boss. Instead, she walked around the table to where little Liam would have been sitting if he were here, placed her hand on the back of the empty chair, and smiled. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, her voice steady and clear, "when can we schedule a meeting to discuss the transition?" The lawyer, who had probably handled hundreds of will readings in his career, looked at Maya with something approaching admiration. "At your convenience, Mrs. Thomas. The estate is yours now." Maya nodded, then did something that would be talked about in those offices for years to come. She walked to where Celeste stood, her perfect makeup now streaked with tears of rage and disbelief, and extended her hand. "I'm sorry for your loss," Maya said simply. "Losing a father is never easy regardless of DNA." Celeste stared at the offered hand as if it were a snake, her eyes wild with fury. "Don't you dare patronize me, you little nobody." Maya let her hand drop, unfazed. "I'm not patronizing you. I'm just sorry that you never learned what your father was trying to teach you." She turned to leave, and that's when Daniel finally found his voice. "Maya, wait." She paused at the door, her hand on the brass handle, but she didn't turn around. I can explain," Daniel said, his voice cracking with desperation. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant for." "For what?" Maya asked quietly, still not turning around. "For me to find out? For our son to ask why his daddy lies? For me to lose our baby because I was working myself to death trying to survive?" Daniel's silence was answer enough. Maya opened the door and walked out, leaving behind the mahogany and leather, the screaming and the scheming, the world of people who had forgotten that character mattered more than comfort. Have you ever had a moment where you realized that everything you thought was a disaster was actually leading you exactly where you needed to be? Drop a comment and share your story, because sometimes our greatest losses prepare us for our most incredible victories. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you believe that good people don't always finish last. 6 months later, Maya stood in the corner office of Belmont Industries, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city. Her name was etched into the glass door behind her. Maya Thomas, Chief Executive Officer. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been board meetings where men twice her age had questioned every decision she made. There had been late nights learning about quarterly reports and stock options and market projections. There had been moments when she wondered if she was in over her head. But Maya had something that all her expensive education couldn't buy: the ability to see people. Really see them. She knew which employees were struggling to make ends meet because she had been there. She knew which managers were more concerned with politics than productivity because she had watched from the outside as they played their games. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, dismissed, counted out. And she used that knowledge to build something different. Under Maya's leadership, Belmont Industries didn't just survive, it thrived. She implemented profit-sharing programs for factory workers. She created childcare facilities for single parents. She established scholarship funds for employees' children. She did all the things that Richard Belmont had probably dreamed of doing but had never known how to implement. The business world called her a visionary. Financial magazines wrote features about her unconventional management style. Other CEOs sought her advice on employee retention and company culture. But Maya knew the truth: she wasn't special. She had just remembered what it felt like to be human. Liam, now 4 years old, would sometimes visit her at the office, his small hand tucked securely in hers as they walked through the halls of the company that was now his legacy. He didn't understand the magnitude of what had changed in their lives, but he understood that his mother was no longer afraid, that their apartment was warm and safe, that there was always food in the refrigerator and books on his shelves. "Mommy," he asked one day as they rode the elevator to her office, "are we rich now?" Maya knelt down to his level, smoothing his hair with the same gentle touch she had always used, back when they had nothing but love. "We're safe now, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft with contentment. "And that matters more than being rich." Because Maya had learned something that money couldn't teach: sometimes justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it doesn't announce itself with fanfare or demand recognition. Sometimes it just shows up quietly in the form of an old man's gratitude and rewrites the ending entirely. As for Daniel and Celeste, their story became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and country clubs across the city. Daniel tried repeatedly to contact Maya in those first few months. Phone calls that went unanswered. Letters that were returned unopened. He even showed up at Belmont Industries once, only to be escorted out by the same security guards who had once removed Maya at his request. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who witnessed it. He had traded a woman who loved him for his character for a woman who wanted him for his potential wealth. When that wealth evaporated, so did Celeste's interest. She disappeared from public view entirely, some said to Europe, others claimed she had moved back in with her biological mother. Either way, Daniel found himself alone with nothing but the echo of his choices. Celeste's fall from grace was swift and complete. Without Richard Belmont's name and fortune to sustain her lifestyle, the invitations stopped coming. The friends who had orbited around her wealth found other sons to circle. She had spent 32 years learning how to spend money and wield power, but she had never learned how to earn respect or build genuine relationships. Maya never spoke publicly about either of them. When reporters asked about her former husband or the woman who had expected to inherit the Belmont empire, Maya's response was always the same: "I'm focused on the future, not the past." Maya could have become bitter. She could have used her newfound power to destroy the people who had destroyed her. She could have let the pain of betrayal harden her heart until she became as cold and calculating as the world that had tried to break her. Instead, she chose to remain who she had always been. A woman who helped strangers in the dark, who worked multiple jobs to feed her child, who saw the humanity in everyone around her. The only difference was that now she had the resources to act on that compassion on a scale she had never imagined possible. Richard Belmont had recognized something in Maya that night outside the office building, not just her bravery but her character. He had seen a woman who would risk her safety for a stranger and realized he had found someone who understood what true wealth really meant. Because in the end, character is the only currency that never loses its value. It's the only investment that always pays dividends. And it's the only legacy that truly lasts. If Maya's story moved you, if it reminded you that good people don't always finish last, then I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button to show that you believe character matters more than convenience. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that their integrity is worth more than any shortcut. And subscribe to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, because we're just getting started with stories that prove love, honesty, and courage still have the power to change everything. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one moment in your life when doing the right thing felt like the hardest choice you could make? Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs to hear. Until next time, remember, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes, it shows up in a will and rewrites the ending entirely. Thank you for being part of this incredible community. Keep believing in the power of good stories to inspire good people. I'll see you in the next narrative.